Hey gang, Sam here. In this episode of GarageCast, we talked to Mike and Jim again from NPA to get our quarterly update. We talked all things about tariffs, recession, stock market, even Yoken's departure and what that might mean for the market. Enjoy this episode of GarageCast.
This is a show for anybody that has something that they want to say. It's going to be full of people with a lot of energy, CEOs, OEMs, vendors.
Best practice ideas in this industry and of neighboring industries.
We're talking to people that are on the cutting edge of processes, management,
Serial entrepreneurs, authors. We really have a feast of all different types of senior level people.
a cornucopia, as it were.
A plethora, maybe. Grab a pen, grab a cup of coffee, and have a seat. Start writing. This is GarageCast.
GarageCast. Welcome to GarageCast. Dantzler, these guys don't even need an intro. These guys are actually like co-hosts now.
I think maybe you and I might need the intro moving forward when they're on. You know,
Yeah,
have
for
them
sure.
give us the intro.
This might be the first time that a lot of the industry has seen their beautiful faces, though, because now we're video recording this thing, too. I mean, there's times when Mike is doing this in the nude. He's done it in all kinds of political apparel. Like, so.
Well, we got him in the shower today, so that's good. You know?
That's true.
You've done a good job keeping those tiles clean behind you there, Mike.
Yeah.
Yes. Thank you very much. Hard work.
Well,
little brush.
yeah. Anybody that's listened to our podcast know that we have these guys on, 4 times a year. We try to get them on quarterly, and they have great insight. So Mike Murray, Jim Woodruff from NPA, thanks so much for joining us once again, guys.
Great to be on. Thank you.
And
Awesome
Jim,
to meet
you
guys
say
again
you're
and,
dealing.
talk about what's going on.
Yeah. Jim, you said you might have some technical difficulties with your audio because what's going on over there?
Well, frequently when we do these things, we spend a lot of time with you guys getting the audio just right. It's got to be absolutely perfect. And we have our roof here at a building in San Diego being redone, and they're stripping the thing off. And they got hammers and generators sitting up on the roof and mariachi music blaring and all kinds of stuff like that. So
That's so awesome.
Yeah, literally. Felt like dancing just the other day, but didn't work out so good. So if that happens today, my apologies. But the other thing is you never know when an earthquake might hit. So that we actually thought it was the roof guys yesterday. We were sitting in our management meeting and the roller came in and we're like, holy crap, what is that? That must be a massive load of stuff they're putting on the roof. And no, it was a really good rumbler. So
All right.
yeah. So anyway, my apologies in advance if any of those happen.
Well, we're going on with the recording,
Either way.
whether it happens or not. Yeah. So,
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah, we should record
Okay.
it last night to really get the full effect. But
Yeah,
more
exactly.
importantly, we could have seen Jim dancing to the mariachi band, which is something we got to put on the list for next time.
true story. All right, guys. So we're recording April of 2025. I'll go ahead and say there's a lot of shit that just has gone down in the past 3 to 4 months since we talked to you. So
And back up, gone down and back up. Tony.
Yeah, exactly. Like gone up and calmed down. And so here we are. And let's just fire off the first question that you guys want to talk about, which is, tariffs and effect on retail, including pre-owned space. Jim, I'm going to hit you first with this. I'll let Mike follow you up on that. Go.
Boy, what a wild card. And it's one of those things that changes from moment to moment. So my general rule of thumb is if you're not sure what's happening, just wait till the next moment. It's hard to say. Mike will have a better read on what's actually happening at the dealership level. We were struggling. We as an industry were struggling with new vehicle sales anyway. I don't know if this is going to make it a whole lot worse. If someone wanted to spend the money on a motorcycle, they still will. A lot of the motorcycles that dealers will be selling in the near term are motorcycles that were already imported. So it's not going to apply. My personal belief is that it's going to be short-lived. And that the smart OEMs are going to be finding ways to get over the hump. They may not import. The container might sit off the coast for a little bit. Whatever strategies they employ, while they kind of wait it out a little bit. So I think it's going to be a limited impact on an already struggling new vehicle sales portion of the industry. Pre-owned, Mike, I don't know. I don't think we've really seen much impact on auction prices yet beyond the normal spring market. Pre-owned is in high demand right now. Dealers that are having a challenge with their new inventory are just loving used because they can control their costs, they can control their selection, all the other control factors that pre-owned brings them. And, so we're seeing that normal spring enthusiasm. It's really, I think we're driven by that at this point. If this is still going on, though, 6 months from now or 12 months from now, then it will be a different story. But I just don't think it's going to last that long.
Interesting. Mike, what do you have to add on to that?
Yeah, I think Jim's spot on with how that's going to work out and how we're seeing it playing out right now. We are at the peak of the wholesale values. When we look at a annualized average over the last 2, 3, 4, 5 years, this is the time when we see the highest average sales prices in the auction. And we're not seeing anything that is abnormally high. It looks very similar to prior years. It is higher than it was 2018, 2019 because the world has changed and the value is higher, but it's very similar to last year. It's not different enough to think that that whole tariff thing is having an immediate impact. But what Jim said is the most, I think, salient point, and that's that, pre-owned creates that control, and the dealers can be as liquid as they want with that pre-owned inventory. They can get more, they can get less, they can dump it, they can raise prices, they can do whatever they want. And there's really no downside to what the guy down the street or across town is doing because the pre-owned bikes stand on their own. They're not going to have the same mix, the same models, the same price points, no matter what. So from that standpoint, pre-owned continues to be popular, and it might be a little more popular right now. In fact, I would say that it is absolutely a little more popular right now than it was this time last year, but it's not spiking in any way, shape, or form that we're seeing.
So you talked about dollar amounts, both of you, and you said, a little bit, nothing spiking. So year over year, as far as volume goes, we're roughly sitting about the same, or we increase or decrease, or?
I would say overall we're above last year. Part of it's because of the new location we added in Kansas City. Part of it is an uptick in repo volumes. Part of it's an uptick in some of the new things we're doing. We're doing some great stuff in the RV marine market, for example. But the dealer side of the business is down. And I think it's just because of what we're talking about here. Pre-owned vehicles are in demand. And so if a dealer has a trade, if they're even getting a trade, then they're keeping the, what they think they can retail on their floor, which is great. That's why we're all here, is to help them do that. But it is impacting that volume. So overall, it's up a little bit, but the mix does shift a little bit. So
quick follow up for you here, Jim, or Mike, either one of you guys. You guys are into the marine space as well, and I'm wondering if you could comment on that same talking point relative to marine. Does it mirror what we're seeing in power sports? Is there some anomaly in marine that we're not aware of?
Gosh, that's a tougher one just because the volumes are lower. So it's highly variable month to month. I think it's experiencing similar dynamics. I think the marine industry and RV as well went through their excess dealer inventory pressures a year or so ago. And so they're kind of coming out of that. And I think we're still in it in power sports, just generally speaking. Depends on the brand and the product type. But so I think they're a little bit ahead of the curve. Also, the amount of trades that boat dealers take in compared to power sports typically, I think is different. I don't think the marine industry does that as often. So the dealer supply is a little bit different picture. And repos are up similarly. So nothing through the roof. The repo volumes at this point in time are right about pre-COVID levels. So no yellow or red flags, but it is more than what we were seeing during COVID. So Mike, what are you seeing out there?
I think that's very similar to what I've seen. Again, the marine space, that is a little bit different sales cycle, trade-in cycle, volumes, things like that. So I think there's not a lot to be, it's not indicating anything that's going crazy on that side at all. The RV guys, that pre-owned space does seem to be warming up as well. We're getting a little bit more exposure to that market every month. We're doing some things to be more engaged and understand what's happening there. And that pre-owned space does seem to be growing a little bit, which is nice.
Yeah. Well, let me ask the obvious next question. Tony's talking about tariffs and effects on retail, stuff like that. And obviously is there a recession coming? We keep hearing that no, the analysts say no. And then when the tariff, the week we had with the tariffs and 100 and whatever % to China, then it was like, oh yeah, now it's probable. And now who knows, right? And Jim, maybe that's the same answer to your first question, but let me start with you. And then Mike will come to you for, what does the industry impact look like either way here?
Yeah, that's a really, really tricky one. And I hesitate because I felt like we had moderate odds of recession in 23, light odds in 24, and I felt pretty good about 25. I was wrong, right? It slowed in various pockets. And I think in some regards, power sports is probably experiencing a bit of a recession. But the industry, you look at the macro numbers, not. The thing that's interesting to me, though, is that looking at the data, and it's worse now, at the end of the year and at the beginning of 25, the consumer hasn't really been in a good position. So I think big picture, the stats and numbers are all pretty good, although they're mostly, for the most part, looking backwards. But you've got consumers with the lowest savings levels in dollars in the last decade, right? All the free money that everybody got during COVID gone, and then some. Credit card debt at an all-time high. Well, things are more expensive, so it's going to go up. But I mean, it's a lot at an all-time high. And credit card default rates in the 2010, 2009 era financial crisis range, right? Not quite that level, but getting close. Mortgage defaults, car defaults, those kind of things don't look too bad at this point in time, but serious pressure. And I think that's part of the reason why power sports is seeing the effects, is that disposable income and the other things that they have to, the general consumer has available to them are very limited, and interest rates are high, et cetera, et cetera. So to me, that smelled more like a recession as I was kind of looking into this year. And actually, the early prognostications that I shared with folks were fairly pessimistic for the year. I think we talked about that, previously. So, I still kind of feel that way. Is that going to be a recession? I don't know. Is it going to be soft? Definitely. We're going to have some pressures. The uncertainty doesn't help, right? So when people get uncertain, you got your basic human emotions, fight, flight, or freeze. And I think the freeze aspect is, very common when we're seeing economic pressure and consumers put their hands in their pocket. They may have some money in the bank account. They may have a job. They may have all the other things that show up in the stats, but they don't feel like spending money because they don't have confidence in where things might be going, or their 401k is taking a massive hit, or whatever. And even though those aren't near-term impacts, they still react to it. So the last thing that I'll share is that I think the stock market's been overvalued for some time anyway. It was due for a correction. And so I think the catalyst was tariffs, but it needed something. It was going to happen this year. And, I think we're just kind of seeing it. So I think we are going to see some softness. Maybe it doesn't technically hit recession, but I wouldn't be surprised to see it.
Wow, a lot to unpack there. Let's hold off on the stock market for a second and let's circle back on that one. But Mike, I want to know your thoughts on industry impacts, and then I have a question specifically for you, Mike.
Okay, industry impact. I think again, I feel like we always come back to the same thing, and that is that pre-owned side. The pre-owned values can fluctuate literally daily, and the one thing that we've seen on the consumer side is the fluctuation in what consumers are doing driveway to driveway. Right, 2/3 of all the transactions in the pre-owned space happen driveway to driveway. And we have some ways of kind of monitoring what's happening out there on the pre-owned space and what's happening driveway to driveway. And we watch those values ebb and flow. And there's a big tell right there when we see, man, guys are getting a little more flexible. They're getting a little more willing to sell that bike for a lower price. It's been pretty stable. We're seeing a slight more willingness to come, for people to sell stuff to lower their price and make a deal versus be proud or get that top dollar asking price. Same thing can be said on the vehicle side, on like the car side. I've still got some friends in the automotive industry, and that space on the pre-owned side is still pretty darn competitive. And, take the whole tariff thing away from it. It was that way 2, 3, 4 months ago before this all came to go. And so there is some settling in the vehicle industry. It has changed, right? And chalk it up to the CarMax, Coved, whatever you want to do, Carvana, all those models that have changed and had some impact on the automotive market. Some of that stuff is trickling over into the power sports side. But I think the stability and the ability to be completely fluid on the pre-owned is going to be the thing that works best for the power sports side. Talking recently with a good sized dealer in one of y'all's neighborhood who does a lot of new units. His pre-owned is way up, and he has managed his new inventory down to a lower level, and he's running 2, 3 used to every one new, and knows that he could do more if he had more used product on his floor, which historically he's been kind of a new bike guy, so to speak. And that was really interesting. Talked to him 2 weeks ago about that when tariff things were still lighting off. And he was hearing a lot of rumblings from some reps and some OEs and some other stuff, which nothing has come to fruition yet. But that pre-owned stays completely fluid regardless of what happens on that market. Even if the market fades a little bit, you can cycle through pre-owned in 2 months. You can be right valued, right sized in your pre-owned regardless of what the economy does. And you just can't do that with the new. You got to wait for the OE to write a rebate or do something incentivized to make that adjustment.
Well, I think that model, whether, the right decision for dealers today may be exactly that, with the pre-owned and the emphasis on pre-owned. It's just, you're just kicking the can down the road with the new products because the OEMs still have to get the product in. Many of them still want to push it to the dealers. And so here we are next year talking about, we're way upside down in the number of new versus pre-owned. So my specific question to you was relative to a guy we had on the podcast by the name of Bob Papajohn, M&P Boats up in Vancouver. So we did a full podcast on him several weeks ago. And this is a guy that had he was too heavy in inventory, was going into the Vancouver Boat Show. And the day of the Vancouver Boat Show was when the tariffs came out for Canada and Mexico. And it just killed his boat show sales when that was the week he was going to flush out all of his inventory out there. And then the, air quotes, to your point, Jim, the permanent tariffs came online. And, here's a guy who's sitting on millions of dollars of inventory, both in high-end yachts and low-end fiberglass boats. And we're talking to him on the podcast, what's the plan here? And he came up with something that I had not thought about, and I wanted your perspective on it because you deal with so many retail operations. He said, when those boats come in and they're coming in at this high tariff, and I'm sitting on boats that are X amount of dollars, and the new boats coming in are X plus 20, 25%. He said, my older boats now look like an absolute value, even at a higher number that I have them at today. So he's purposely playing his current obsolete, by 12 months old or older is our definition, his current obsolete boat inventory against the inbound price increase that is coming along the way. And I just thought, number one, it was a very optimistic take on that. And number two, have you heard anybody using that same strategy?
On the power sports side, not yet, because I haven't heard anybody that's had a concrete edict come down from any of the OEs that says, hey, by the way, prices are absolutely doing this or doing that, or we're going to tack this on. It's interesting because I went to right there. Hey, listen, if you're an OE, if you're a new bike dealer and you have imported product and you own it correct, you own it at dealer cost, and here is MSRP. Yeah, playing through at MSRP to be a good value against that potentially higher price stuff. Yeah, there's some cost averaging there. It does look like a better value. And, to Jim's point, I think it's not going to be long lived. I think there's going to be an adjustment here. I don't see motorcycle manufacturing at any large scale coming to the US. I think other things can happen. I think there's other industries that it makes sense because the volumes and the cost basis opportunities are so much greater for them to move some manufacturing to the US, which I'm generally a fan of. But I think on the motorcycle side, that's a little more challenging. It's a little bit more niche market. And I don't think that I don't think the US has the capacity to digest massive manufacturing of motorcycles. I wish they did. It'd be amazing if we had a culture more like Europe where the motorcycle ridership was much, much higher. But today, I don't think that exists.
Well, but then again, marketing is so much about emotion. And if that is the play to the consumer, that you've always wanted this motorcycle, it's not going to get cheaper, right? Yeah. Given the current situation right now, now's the time. It may be a good event that dealers could run out there.
So coming back full circle on this is, again, so this is, we're talking about the tariffs, and Sam and I were talking about this yesterday on the phone, which is, again, pause 90 days. So we're talking about up, coming back down, and what it's doing not only to the strategy of the manufacturers who are trying to figure it out, and also the strategy of dealers that are still trying to find it out, which is, I feel like we're all just in suspended animation to see what shakes out in the next 90 days. But one result, Jim, that you had alluded to when these tariffs were announced, it tanked the stock market. We saw that correction that you feel was necessary. So stock market correction and the impacts that it has not only on the economy, but on the dealers as a whole. Why don't you start to discuss that?
Yeah, it's hard to say that declining stock prices have a direct impact on the industry. Because the stock market is so many other things besides motorcycles and ATVs and all the cool stuff that we sell. The power sports manufacturers that are publicly listed have struggled over the last year anyway. So it's they already kind of have been taking some of their medicine. It's really that wealth effect, which is how people feel about their 401k, about their stock investments, et cetera. And not every consumer obviously has stuff in the market, but they hear about it. They see the news headlines. They're listening to one TV channel or another, and their emotional state changes. And I think that thing we talked about earlier, fight, flight, or freeze, I think that freeze instinct does kick in when you have a massive correction like what we've had, and people kind of put their hands in their pockets. Now, one of the things that we have seen in the past, and it takes time, right? Weeks, or I would say probably more like months, is that at some point in time, consumers, people in general, that we all probably feel it ourselves, we kind of get tired of dealing with it, right? It happened during COVID, happened during the financial crisis. And at some point in time, we collectively say to ourselves, to heck with this, I'm going to go have fun. I'm tired of being at home. I'm tired of, being super conservative. I'm just going to, live once and go for it. It's just at a different scale, right? They may not go out and spend tens of thousands of dollars on some really cool new vehicle, but they might go buy a used one, or they might dust their unit off in the garage and put some repairs into it, et cetera. So I think we're not to that point yet, but there is an upside to it. Also, other things could happen. You get those bumps in the road, and this isn't necessarily a stock market thing, but from a market perspective, that can happen. If you remember back in the financial crisis in 2008, part of what went on during that time period is gas prices went through the roof. They just went nuts. And what happened? Everybody went and bought a low displacement motorcycle. Why? Because they always wanted one, and now they had a really good excuse to do so. So, hey, babe, or whoever, I'm going to save us some money. That was only about a 6-month run, but that can happen as well, because when you have some significant distortions or displacements in the market, whether it's changes in the stock market or tariffs or things like that, sometimes things happen in other parts of the market that can be good for us. We're not there yet, but we could very well see that if it continues through later this year.
Mike, anything to add on that?
No, I think the additional thought process I have on that is that there's a lot of our industry buyers, not all of them, but there's a cross section of our industry buyers that are not super affected by all the rhetoric. Now, again, that's not universal, and there definitely is probably an upper tier of guys that go and buy the $30,000 and $40,000 power sports equipment, be it a Harley or a Razor or a Can-Am or whatever. And I think some of those folks are maybe a little sensitive right now. Maybe they're not going to rip out those checks right now, but I think there's a lot of other people that just want to ride. Kind of to Jim's point, that they're going to be like, hey, you know what, that may all be happening. You know what? I'm still swinging a hammer on a construction site. I'm still doing whatever I'm doing, and my job hasn't really changed. I hear all this stuff, but it hasn't really changed my day. And you know what? I want to ride. I want a new motorcycle or a newer motorcycle. And so I still think there's a cross section. And what I'm hearing from some dealers is there is, and that's what's supporting the pre-owned demand right now that we've seen. We have a group of Harley dealerships that buys from us very, very frequently. And, they have not let off the gas on their pre-owned purchasing from us. And then the reason is because they keep running out every time they stock up at one of our California auctions. They're right back within 30 days to get another several dozen, because that cross section is still working for them, and they're spread out all over California, and the pre-owned space is working.
Yeah, you know what? I got to follow up on this based off of some of the answers and things that we've been discussing here, and that is that I think we all can see, and in talking to the dealers, and some dealers that have been on the podcast are already talking about, the pre-owned is how we're going. That's what's really moving right now. It's going out the door, which creates a problem that I think that we're just in its inception, which is the manufacturers have just an abundant amount of stuff that they need to get rid of, right? And they've been holding some of it. They've been trying to move some chess pieces around the board to prolong it into the future. At the end of the day, this is going to come back to roost at some point. And the way that that's going to happen is the dealers are going to have to sell that inventory at some point in time, right? So we blew out a ton of new stuff, COVID. We are now experiencing the turbulence of the ripple effect that we were talking about years ago about there's going to be this surplus. Now they're starting to sell pre-owned. That still doesn't take care of the new stuff out there. I'm not asking you guys to be Nostradamus, but what do you see in a year when it comes to new, because at some point this stuff has to go away. Jim, what are your thoughts?
Great assessment. And I think a year from now, it's going to be mostly back to normal, or it'll be on the path to normal. By mid next year, it should be okay. Two reasons. First, I think that manufacturers and to a certain extent dealers will do things that thin that overhang, because they have to. It may be painful, but they'll do what they need to do. And I also think that from an economic perspective, we're going to be in better shape next year than this year. So a lot of the things we're talking about today and you hear about in the news are the pressures of tariffs and the stock market decline and all that stuff. But what about the other side of the coin? What if there are some tax policy changes or fiscal policy changes that are implemented that are actually good for the economy? That's what we really need. That's what the plan was going into this new administration. We haven't seen any of that part yet. And I think that those things could have a significant positive impact on not only the economic numbers, but just how people feel about things. So I think we're going to be in much better shape at that point in time. Obviously, if manufacturers keep churning out new product and keep pumping it into the dealership channel, that's going to be a problem, but they're not really doing that at this point in time. And tariffs may actually help with that a little bit. If you're a overseas OEM and you're subject to it, you may have the product, but you're going to delay the importing until the dust settles, like we talked about before. And that could also help with the scarcity value by limiting that new inbound stuff. So, my guess is a year from now we're going to be in a much better position on new.
Yeah, I concur. I think that new product is going to get balanced out for all those things. And I mean, look. I mean, how much have things changed in 2 days or 5 days or 15 days since all this stuff is kind of blown up and then settled down, and exactly where is it going to balance? And I think that balancing point will get sorted out. I think it will ultimately be good for our consumers and our businesses in the United States. I think there's going to be a benefit there, absolutely positively. There's 12 million on-road motorcycles roughly registered in the United States. There is a ton of product out there on the pre-owned space that dealers can be touching. They can take it in and trade. We don't know exactly what the volume of new product is sitting on floors right now, but to your earlier point, we know it's a lot, and it's probably more than they need. I think there is going to be some balancing out, right? We've seen some brands try to figure out how to do this and how to balance it and how to, stay in business in some way, shape, and form. And I think they're going to find that here in the next, probably by this fall, would be my estimation, though. Once we get through the summer and a lot of this dust has settled, I think that 2026 model year is going to be much more right-sized, to Jim's point and prediction, than we saw this year.
So let me... we were just talking about OEMs a little bit ago, and I sit here and I think about, not that everybody hasn't gotten hit in the stock market, but Polaris took a big hit. We still don't know. I don't think we still have a grasp on where KTM is and what's going on. It depends on which article you happen to be reading and what team that person cheers for, who's writing the article. But Harley specifically has been through some turmoil as of late. And you mentioned, Mike, you had a Harley dealer that keeps coming and buying, dozens of pre-owned and stuff out there. Let's talk about Yoken's departure here. What happens with his departure? What's the impact on Harley retail? What's the impact on pricing? I'm sure that has a lot to do with who fills the seat, but from the hip, what are your thoughts? Mike, I'll start with you and then end up with Jim here on that.
I believe it's going to be a net positive for Harley dealers. I think Zeitz had a lot of interesting ideas, and some of them arguably were good to decent for Harley-Davidson dealers. And then there were some that were not well received, be it by the dealers or ultimately the consumers. I think there was some trial and error there, or some ideas that just didn't land with that industry for all his expertise and business experience. Some of that stuff just didn't land with power sports or Harley dealers or those Harley consumers. I think the board will do a much better job of finding someone that's going to mesh with that industry. As much as, a lot of things in the power sports industry have changed in the last 20, 30, 40, 50 years, whatever you want to call it, there is still a culture, especially with that brand, that does not change a lot, that makes minor adjustments, not major changes. They have a lot of good product out there. They've done some cool things, which I think is good. I think they still have some vacancies in the market to really be a brand that can, survive another 100+ years. And the dealers that I know that will talk to me candidly, are optimistic about the future at this point. They all had some frustrations. Retail wasn't where they hoped it would be. They didn't always feel like they got the support they needed or deserved, or could be the brand ambassadors they wanted to be. One of the things I loved about Harley stores, and still do to a large degree, is being able to bounce across the country, seeing the individuality of the Harley stores and the culture. And hey, we're more of a, this style store, that style store. We're an old school store. We're kind of a newer store. We're a big super store. Hey, we're a really small store. I mean, all those things were a culture part of the brand of Harley-Davidson, which I think added value to the company. And there was a bit of a move to standardize so many things, and I think that worked against the brand and the uniqueness. And the guy that wanted to get on his Harley and go hit 25 different Harley stores on a 10-day road trip or something like that, and see the different stores. So hopefully they can maintain that individuality at the dealer level. And a lot of that also goes into the pre-owned. Hey, we do a lot of pre-owned. We're a 100 bike a month pre-owned store, or whatever they happen to be. Hey, we do mostly new, but we'll still take trade. So that individuality, I think, is key. And not only on Harley, it also carries over to the metric side. Having a store personality and a feel, I think, is what separates the stores and allows them to compete with one another in a good way, not just on price, not just on, who's running the lowest price or who's racing to the bottom, but who provides the customer the experience. And so I think not only Harley has that opportunity to increase it, but the metric guys continue to maintain that as well.
Yeah, I like that. Tony, did you notice that Mike never misses an opportunity to plug the pre-owned market? Did you hear that right at the end? Particularly with pre-owned, blah, blah, blah.
Pre-owned.
That's right.
One of these times also, I want Mike to say after Jim, you know what, Jim, actually, I think you're full of shit. Here's what I actually think is going to happen.
Well, that was yesterday.
You guys are totally off base. So, Jim, now's your time. Right now, here we go.
Yeah. Well, I was going to say, just hang out at one of our money management meetings, and you'll hear plenty of that from Mike. So, but that's okay. I like the conversations that we have. So, I think people have been wishing for some changes there for a while, and I don't really know Yoken. I don't know the board or those kind of things, so I can't really comment from personal experience. But I think the general feeling of, hey, we've got some fresh opportunity here and fresh perspective will bring some enthusiasm back to the brand and back to the dealers that represent the brand. That will be good. Now, when you get to some of the hardcore things like price point, financing, product mix, are there any entry-level bikes, some of the fundamental levers that have a direct impact on the business, how is that going to affect that, right? And so I think it really comes down to who they bring in, when they bring them in, and what changes they make. I think Mike hit on a key point. And, he was talking about the individuality and those kind of things, which is a great perspective. For me, a lot of it is really the experience, right? Owning a Harley, really owning any kind of motorcycle, but a lot of the Harley brand is the experience that you have. And I think that was affected over the last several years. And I think if that could be reinvigorated and more of a return to the core and then expand from there, versus trying to change things into something new, will be a good strategy for them. So, we shall see. It's really going to come down to leadership and whether or not the board selects someone of a similar vein, or whether they go more back to their roots, or, somebody from within the industry. But I think it'll be, to Mike's point, a net positive. Got it.
Let's talk about the health of consumer financing right now, as far as it's concerned with repos right now, repossessions in the marketplace. Jim, I'll hit you first.
Yeah, we talked about it a little bit before, and repossessions at this point are up over last year, really up over the entire COVID period, and they are about pre-COVID levels. So no yellow flags, no red flags, et cetera. So I think it's in a healthy state. One of the things that the banks have struggled with over the last several years is regulation and some of the crazy rules that have been implemented to, quote unquote, protect the consumer that really make it difficult to be a bank. And at some point in time, if your life becomes really difficult, you're either going to stop lending or you're going to raise your rates, et cetera, to be able to compensate for it to the extent that regulations allow you. So, we haven't seen too much of that yet, but they were feeling that pressure. One of the good things about repos, I think, over the last couple of years, especially, is particularly, with the things that we've done working with them and have been in the industry forever, is getting better at the repo process. So part of the repo volume uptick is lenders being more successful actually recovering units. So the recovery rates still aren't back to where they were a decade or so ago, but they're way better than they were during COVID, because the repossession network basically got decimated during COVID because there weren't that many of them, and people got PPP money and then went and did some other things, et cetera, et cetera. So that's good news. I think the processes that banks have to recover their funds so they can keep lending are improved, and they're not in the yellow zone yet on losses. Now, if the economy does do more than soften this year and actually goes pretty far south, then those losses may cause those lenders to pull back a lot more. They're a little conservative right now, but they basically just tightened up their standards. But if we see what we saw during the financial crisis of people not lending on pre-owned anymore, or just making massive changes, that will have a direct impact to the industry. So I don't see that happening personally. And I think the lending industry overall is fairly healthy right now. But it wouldn't take much to tip the scales.
Mike?
Still don't have the opportunity to say that Jim is not correct. Retail financing is always a challenge, right? And we've seen that, and that was the biggest killer in 10, 11, 12, maybe even into 13 was the retail financing. And to be fair with our friends over at Harley-Davidson Financial, that's one of their strong suits. Is they have the ability to be more aggressive in financing as far as brands go. They do have some of the more stable or open opportunity financing, I guess you'd say. They greet potential financing customers with more open arms than some of the other folks, which is a good thing for that brand. And, I know that it comes at a cost, and that's all a big financial and economic matrix they have to work out. But that is something that could have a negative effect, is if pre-owned financing gets super difficult for any reason, that will have a negative impact on the industry. That will cause some real pain and strife.
Yeah, there is one other element, and frequently when we talk about financing, we think about the retail financing side of things and repos and all the things we were talking about. But the commercial side for flooring lines, I think, is another good thing to take a look at in the current environment. So when you have a situation where dealers have a ton of inventory, they have more than they need, and rates are high, that's probably one of the biggest pressures that dealers are facing today, is just their flooring costs. They're through the roof compared to what they were before, both because of the interest rates and because they've got more than they need. Well, what if you're a financing company? And what if you're looking down the road and you see some economic headwinds that could be recession, and you might be looking at dealers going out of business or struggling in some fashion? That's a lot of paper to be carrying. And that's not necessarily units that can easily be quickly sold at retail. The dealer had their shot, right? So you got to get it to another dealer who's authorized for that brand, and it's a lot more complicated. So I think there is some risk there right now. Again, the tipping point I don't think has occurred yet, but if we see more than a soft downturn this year, that could be a pretty big risk for some of the folks that are doing commercial flooring.
Got it. Guy, you look at all these puzzle pieces, and I'm sitting here thinking, well, if I'm an OEM, now what? Right? Do I just grab the shit bar and hold on, or like, what's the takeaway here, Jim, for the OEMs? Pick any OEM. What do you do given this climate, particularly what you just laid on top of it all with that last statement?
Yeah, Jim, name it too.
Yeah, give it a name. I like the shit bar. That's a good one. Yeah. I think they just have to buckle down and right size. Right? It sucks to not be able to build and sell new vehicles. Well, it's never going to be zero, right?
Sure.
But it's probably needs to be less than what you want, and your stock might be affected, and people may not be happy. But if I was in their shoes, I wouldn't be looking at the next 6 or 12 months. I'd be looking at 5 years from now. What's that look like? 10 years from now, what's that look like? And getting to that point in time. And that's innovation. That's new products. That's, hey, what I have today that I make that I'm having a hard time selling because of, 5 different reasons. What would people like to buy? And what will get me through the next few years until we get to the brighter future, et cetera. So, I think we've got an industry full of great innovators and very smart people. And I think those that are looking longer term will make the necessary adjustments. They'll right size, they'll be in a healthy position, and they'll, come out of it smelling clean. Those that get over leveraged, those that have a hard time facing reality and continue to, pump out too much product. I don't see anybody doing that right now, but I did last year. They're paying their price right now, unfortunately. Yep. But I think that we've got a pretty good group of folks that are going to navigate their way through it. The other way to get out of it as well is not just the inventory, but that's what can we do to get more people buying all this awesome stuff that our manufacturers make. This is some of the most fun toys that anybody could go out and enjoy. And when we talk about inventory being too high, a lot of that's a function of, hey, we're not selling enough of it, right? So where can me and my dog and my cat go for a ride in the side by side, So I think that getting that's going is really important. And the Motorcycle Industry Council, the National Power Sports Dealer Association, the OEMs, et cetera, are very focused on that. And I think we're going to see more along those lines as well in the coming years. And I know it's tough when money's tight, but to the extent that the OEMs can continue to support new ridership,
yes,
even if it's getting them on a pre-owned bike to start with, eventually they're going to buy you or a new bike. That will and needs to continue to happen to get out of this mess.
Yeah, it's a great answer, Mike. I'm going to come to you because I sit here, I think about, Jim, what you said, which never occurred to me, which is like the ship with all the products sitting offshore so that we don't have to pay. Like, how do you factor that into the math on the OEM side of the fence? And maybe you just focus, you can control what you can control. So let's put the gas pedal down on selling what we can sell. Let's get the support from NPDA and MIC and everybody else and continue to push the inventory because that's mainly all we can do. Mike, anything you wanted to add to Jim's comment?
Yeah, I'd say, again, if we were to sit with some of our OE partners, and I think the original question was what's our recommendation, or what would we tell the OEs, or what do they do? I think the customer is right, and the customer is the dealer, and the dealers need the opportunity to manage their inventory and the right size inventory. And, I know, the OE's job is to sell the dealer inventory, and the dealer has to go and in turn sell that to the public. Well, there's a bit of a logjam there in the dealership right now, and the OE just needs to be very sensitive and understanding. And I think they are. I think that is an understanding that's still in process, but I think there's still some support. And again, Jim said it great. This is not a 6 or 12 month problem. This needs to be looked at as a 5-year plan. There might be a challenge. There might be some headwinds right now, but where are we going here in 2, 3, 4, 5 years? What's our real goal here so that we can get through some of this pain or uncertainty or tumult in the market right now, and get on the other side of it and without totally freaking out on some of the pressure points right now.
Got it.
Yeah. Final question, guys. I'll start with you, Mike, is, what should we be looking at right now that maybe we're not, whether that's a segment, dirt bike, sports bikes, pre-owned Harley? What are the dials that we should be looking at for the next 6 months? I'll start with you, Mike, then I'll go to Jim.
I'm trying to say something besides pre-owned.
But while we're talking about it,
when we talk to dealers, I think the trade-in opportunity is still underserved. I think the dealers we talk to, my still favorite thing, and I sat with a 20 group here, a couple. In fact, I think 2 of them so far this year I've sat with, and with the general managers, sales managers, and asked what their confidence level is that every one of your people on the sales floor is willing and able to talk about the customer bringing a trade in, that they're not afraid of a trade that might be uncomfortable, that might not work, how to sell through a deal that's not going to fly, if they're over leveraged in that trade, yet they still might buy another one, how to work around that. I think that opportunity on the sales floor is still underutilized. I think we still have a somewhat young sales staff on the floors of these dealerships. I think we had a big churn through COVID, and I think we still have a lot of sales training and sales reinforcement investment opportunities at the dealership level for the people on that floor. I think there's still a challenge to find excellent employees. NPA is blessed to have a ton of excellent employees, but I know at the dealership level, sometimes they can't find all the best techs, all the best sales folks, even the best sales managers. And I think that store owners, general managers, sales managers, I think they need to continue to invest in that sales process so that they're not missing opportunities that are already on their floors. I think there's more opportunity that is currently coming through the doors that is not being leveraged to the fullest extent. And that alone could change the bottom line of a store, 5, 10, 15% potentially on an annualized basis if they were able to make sure that they did everything in a really, really well-run process situation.
Love it. Jim?
Yeah, I think Mike said it perfectly. He's 100% right. And, when we take a look at different product segments, price point is going to be king for a while, right? That's part of the pressure that folks that have overstocked inventory are feeling. That tends to be the higher price stuff, but smaller displacement, lower cost, whether it's a lower cost new vehicle or that perfect pre-owned vehicle, et cetera. I think that those are the best bets for dealers out there today trying to figure out what to stock up. There's always that boutique thing or some new model or hot sport bike or whatever that you just don't have enough of. Dealers know what those are. And, find them, whether it's being aggressive on trying to purchase off the street or finding them at auction or, whatever the method may be. But price point's going to be king for probably at least the next 12 months. Fuel economy, I don't see that being a big one. Sometimes that's related to price point. We talked about that happening back in 2008 when there was, severe economic pressure. I think it's really not going to be that. It's really going to be more just what can people afford without financing or with a monthly payment that they can absorb. And I think that's what's going to get us through to the next side.
Love it. Mike Murray, Jim Woodruff, good stuff as always. It's always good to spend 45 minutes with you guys and get some really great insight into what's going on out there. Thank you guys very much because I know you guys are super busy.
Always love catching up with you guys. And yeah, it's a pleasure. And hopefully folks find value in it. Can't wait to do the next one.
Thanks, guys.
Excellent. Wonderful. For Mike Murray and Jim Woodruff, Sam Dantzler, I'm Tony Gonzalez. This has been GarageCast. Have a fantastic Tuesday, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.